Welcome back to Liberty Watch, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Liberty Man Van, where we talk about libertarian principles. We kind of look at the world through a libertarian lens. And what do we believe? We believe in free markets. That is laissez-faire capitalism. We believe freedom of association. And we believe you shouldn't hit people or take their stuff. That's the non-aggression principle. So pretty simple stuff. So we're just for a maximum of freedom. That's what a libertarian is. So today is May 18th, 2018. And today we're going to talk about some stories. And here are the headlines. The first story is entitled, Guaranteed Jobs for All. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Bernie Sanders is back. So we'll talk about his proposal to guarantee everybody a $15 an hour job. And then our next story will be kind of a good feeling story. It's called Dark Chocolate, Please. And then after that one, the next story is entitled Virgin Ban, and it's about a lady who got banned from air flights. And, well, we'll go into the details, but just suffice it to say for now that she is not a virgin. Okay. And then after that, our next story will be entitled Government Sins. Boy, there's a lot we could put under that category, huh? So I'll just keep you dangling for now. We'll have a few government sins we'll go over. And then finally, our last story is entitled Hillary is Back. Oh, just when you thought it was safe to go in the water, right? So, and we might just throw a little bit of libertarian humor in there at some point. We'll see. So thanks for joining us. Here we go. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. Guess who's back in the news? You guessed it, our old friend Bernie Sanders, aka the Grinch. Now wait a minute, how can you say Bernie Sanders if you haven't watched the show before? Those of you who watch the show will know why I call him the Grinch, but for those of you who are new, I'll explain it to you. You see, what did the Grinch do? He posed as Santa Claus, but then he came down the chimney and stole the kid's toys, right? And this is exactly what Bernie Sanders likes to do. He wants to have these big government programs, and so somebody's got to pay for the programs, and since the government doesn't have enough money to pay for the programs, that means they'll have to borrow the money to do it. And if they borrow the money, that's just a tax on future generations. So you're stealing from the kids. Therefore, the Grinch. But his latest proposal is to, and he's sketchy on the details so far. He's just kind of announced this proposal with few details, but he wants to guarantee everybody a $15 an hour job. Okay. So yes, that means the minimum wage right now is less than $15 an hour. And let's just go through the economics here real quickly of why these proposals, he doesn't only just want to give them $15 an hour, but also health benefits. Okay. So who's going to provide these health benefits for free? Are the doctors and the nurses and all those folks in the healthcare industry, are they going to work for free? Probably not. So that means we got to borrow not only $15 an hour, but some more on top of that to pay for the health care benefits, right? This thing just getting more expensive as we go. But let's just talk about the free market for a second. What if you're making, say, $10 an hour? If you're worth $15 an hour and you're only making $10 an hour and your employer is too cheap to pay you what you're worth, guess what? You can go somewhere else and get a job where they're going to pay you. If you're really worth $15 an hour, there's going to be another employer over here that's going to be willing to pay you that. I mean, that's how the market works. Employers will lose employees if they're underpaying. If they're underpaying the employees, they'll go somewhere else. And that's very costly for an employee, because then they got to turn around and retrain someone else, right? But if you're working a job where no training is required, then, and you say you go to the employer and you don't have any job skills, and that's the only job you could get because you don't have a lot of job skills, and that's okay. You're getting your foot in the door to work. That's a good thing. But if you're only worth $10 an hour and you go to your employer and you demand $15, he's going to say, okay, if you can make $15 an hour somewhere else, go for it. Because it's not going to cost him anything to bring somebody else in. Yeah, he's going to have to find the employee. There's a small cost involved there. There's some cost, involved with having to go pull another person out of the file and call them, see if they, somebody that's applied for a job. So there's some trouble involved there. So he'd rather keep the employee. But if they decide to go and he didn't spend a lot of time having to train them, then he's not out of a lot of money. But an employer who spends some time training someone, has quite a bit of time invested in their training, it's very costly for them to walk and go somewhere else. So there's an incentive for employees for employers to pay their employees what they're worth. That's how the market works. So, in this proposal to guarantee everybody $15 an hour, let's say what's going to happen to the person who's currently only worth $10 an hour? Well, we know he's only worth $10 an hour because that's all the employer is willing to pay him, or that's all they can pay him. So what are they going to do? They're going to quit that job and go get the guaranteed $15 an hour job. Right? So, what's going to happen? Who's going to pay for this? It's either going to have to be paid for through increased taxes, all right, to pay for this $15 an hour plus health care. So the taxpayers are going to have to pay more in taxes in order to make this happen. Or the government's going to have to borrow the money, which is just a tax on future generations. Or they can try to force the cost onto businesses. And that's going to lead to price inflation. And let's say you're one of those businesses. Let's say they try the third route to try to make business pay for this increase in the minimum wage, basically. Well, the businesses will either get a taxpayer subsidy to make that happen. If they can only afford to pay somebody, they're only worth $12 an hour, the government will make up that extra $3 an hour. That's one way it can be done. But again, that's going to be a tax, right? Or that business could lose employees. If you got a small business and they can only afford to pay $10 an hour, and all of a sudden you got to pay $15 an hour, and then that's going to, first of all, it's going to favor large businesses because that extra cost involved it's easier for a large business to push that extra cost out there, okay, to absorb the extra cost, and so that would be a disadvantage for small business. Small businesses that really couldn't afford to pay that would just have to either lay a bunch of employees off, and large businesses too, if they didn't feel like they were worth that much. It's going to cause people to lose their jobs. But wait a minute. I guess not, because they're guaranteed a job, right? Who's going to give them these jobs? Is the government going to employ everybody, these people? Once they get, if the private sector can't afford to pay them $15 an hour and they let them go, they're just magically going to have a job. There's so many things that are stupid about this proposal that, yeah, I look silly with this cap on. We're going to give everybody a job and benefits, and we'll make the rich people pay for it. Vote for me. I think even Bernie Sanders is not stupid enough in his heart of hearts to think this thing can really work. He's probably going to make another run for president. Who knows? And so the problem is that there's probably going to be enough voters to be fooled by this proposal and thinking that this is actually possible, that they'll go out and vote for him. So I think this is just mainly a political ploy by Bernie. Surely he's not stupid enough to think this can work. Our next story is called Dark Chocolate, Please. And man, this one makes me so happy because this good news about all you chocolate lovers out there. A new study has been released that was done at Loma Linda University in California. And they found that dark chocolate is actually good for you. And the darker the chocolate, the more cocoa it has in it, the better. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The higher the concentration of cocoa, the better were the benefits. Now, cocoa is rich in flavonols, and these are antioxidants found in fruits and vegetables that dampen inflammation. Inflammation bad. People who ate chocolate every day were found to have better attention spans, working memory, faster cognitive processing, and better verbal fluency. The experiments showed a daily hit of chocolate for elderly people improved their brain function. And it seems the benefits were the best for older populations who have already experienced some memory decline, such as in Alzheimer's. So, eat up, everybody, and enjoy. Man, I can feel my brain going into hyperdrive already. 193, 86, 79, 72. I'm counting backwards by sevens from 100. Wow. Looks like an orgasm for the brain. If you have some dark chocolate handy, join me, ladies and gentlemen, and be happy. And our next story is entitled Virgin Ban. And this is from a Fox News article entitled Couple Caught Having Sex on Transatlantic Flight, Woman Banned from Airline. And when I first saw that headline, your first thought is, well, why didn't the guy get banned too? If they're going to ban somebody for having sex, hey. Well, as it turns out, the lady was just a little more rowdy. So let's get to the rest of the story. A transatlantic restroom dalliance aboard a flight ended with the woman involved banned from ever flying again on the airline. According to reports, the cabin crew aboard a March 13 flight that departed from Gatwick Airport in London en route to Cancun, Mexico, were furious to find a man and a woman, both in their late 20s, having sex in the economy cabin bathroom rather. There's not any bedrooms in the economy section. Now, I wonder if these folks had been flying first class, if maybe they would have given them a little bit more leeway. Think so? If this was a frequent flyer, had built up a whole bunch of miles with the airline, maybe they treat her a little differently. Who knows? Minutes later, the rowdy woman got into a spat with her female traveling companion and reportedly threw drinks around the cabin. So this, like what happened after the sex incident's really what got her banned. But an airline spokesman confirmed to Fox News that the woman was not banned as a result of one incident, but for repeatedly refusing to comply with crew requests and for disruptive behavior throughout the flight. And so, where did this dalliance occur, folks? That's right, on Virgin Airlines. I'm not making this up. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's too good. Who needs fiction? Truth is always more wild than any fiction you can think up, ladies and gentlemen. Here's just another example. In this joke, there's a sign, a real sign, and it says no cruising. 2 times past same point within 6 hours is cruising. And the caption reads, but without government, who would protect us from people who drive past the same point twice within 6 hours? And our next section is entitled Government Sins. And why do we libertarians like to point out the deficiencies of government when they screw things up? Because they're doing it with our money, right? They stole it from us, and then they do things that just wouldn't happen in the private sector. So we trust we trust people to spend their own money much more effectively and efficiently than anybody else can spend it for you. So let's just go over the first under government sins. The first story is called Gas Tax Raiders. And this is from a Forbes magazine article entitled The Gas Tax Doesn't Work Because Politicians Broke It. And from the story it says, the gas taxes problem started when Congress raided the trust fund to keep the government solvent. In 1990, Congress approved an increase in the gas tax but allotted only half of the new revenue to building projects. The other half was dedicated to deficit reduction, which then, as now, was all the rage. In 1993, Congress approved another gas tax and again devoted some of the revenue to deficit reduction. So there's been a big push lately, Obama and now President Trump. Did I mention President Trump? There's a push to, and this is one of the things that Trump said during his campaign, is we need to, we need to upgrade America's infrastructure. And that makes sense. You can't let your roads and everything just go to pot, because you don't just have, people go to work on those roads. You have products delivered by trucks. So, there's just a lot of reasons why you need to keep your infrastructure up. An obvious way to do that would be with a gas tax, and just to tax the people. That's if you're going to have government, right? You could do this with the private sector, just have people build roads and then you pay to use the road. Okay, that's how it would be done. And that's already, done. You see some toll roads around, and that's how that would work. But in the current system, since they taxed everybody to pay for the roads, how do you keep these roads built up? And it does seem a logical way to do it is just to have a gas tax, and that way the people who use the road and use the gas tax to keep the roads maintained, to keep the bridges maintained. But they stole the money and used it for something else. Is this not just the way these people work? Because this reminds me of Social Security. There was supposed to be a Social Security trust fund. When you sent your when they robbed it from your paycheck and sent it to Washington, they were supposed to keep it in a trust fund so that trust fund could grow and then pay future beneficiaries. Guess what happened to that trust fund? Oh, you're shocked to learn they raided it too, right? And spent it on something else. Those responsible folks in Washington. This is why we need small governments, because any dime you give them, they're going to waste. Our next story is entitled Government Recycling Programs Wasteful. And this is from a Mises.org article entitled Government Recycling Programs Waste Valuable Resources. I'm just going to read some sections from the article. It says the government tells us we must recycle all kinds of stuff, bottles, cans, paper, plastics, etc. They say that recycling reduces the number of products made from natural resources, which means more resources are conserved and our energy costs are lower. Makes sense on the surface, doesn't it? Our objective is to minimize the use of resources, including energy, in the manufacturing process for all products. In order to achieve our objective, we must be guided by market forces without exception. As long as prices are allowed to freely adjust to changes in supply and demand, the resources will be allocated to their most highly valued uses, and resource conservation will be maximized. The capitalistic process of profits and losses ensures these outcomes. Now let's get into the economics of recycling, again from the article. In an unhampered market, if it is profitable to manufacture products by recycling plastics, bottles, paper, etc., then it will be done, and firms might even pay us to take away our empty containers. However, if such a business is not profitable, then these items will simply be included in our regular household garbage. And by the way, we are not running out of landfill space. Yeah, so let me just stop here just a second, give you a little of my own input here. So what they're talking about is, let's just take plastic for an example. And let's say you're a toy manufacturer and you use plastics to make toys. And you're currently paying, say, $1 a square foot or $1 a square yard, whatever it is. Let's just pick a number out of the air. $1 a square yard. You're currently paying someone that manufactures your plastic for you. Okay, and you buy that plastic for $1 a square yard. Now, let's say you are a recycling business and you can go collect plastic from sources like bottles from homes or wherever you get the plastic from. You can advertise it so that people know that you will pay them for their plastic. All right, or at least you'll take it away for them free of charge. And so if you're this recycling company, let's say you can go pick up the plastic and run it through a plant and recycle it into a form that the toy manufacturer can use. And you can do that for, say, 50 cents a square yard. Okay. Now, if you can do that for 50 cents a square yard and this toy manufacturer is paying $1 a square yard, guess what? There's a profit opportunity there. You can recycle the plastic and deliver it to someone for cheaper than they can get new plastic. Now it's economically viable. It makes sense to recycle because you know that includes your energy costs and everything, right? So the point is, if the economics worked out, it would already be done. Government wouldn't have to do it. If government's doing it, that's probably a sign that there's not any, and there's not any profit in it. That means these resources are more valuable to be thrown. They're not valuable enough to recycle at this point. Okay? It's cheaper, more economical. It makes sense just to throw it away. All right. To determine the viability of a recycling enterprise, a free market firm must balance the cost of committing resources, labor, trucks, machines, recycling plants. All right? If you're going to recycle, you have to pay for all these things. And they have to balance that cost of the task of recycling against the revenue it receives for its recycled products. If the firm does not believe the enterprise will be profitable, it will not proceed with recycling, just like we said. This is the point constantly overlooked by the public when governments involve themselves in recycling. In our rush to conserve resources, we forget that resources are required for the task of recycling, like gasoline, trucks. And we just assume the government is doing the right thing. Don't ever assume that, ladies and gentlemen. Because whatever they're doing, their enterprise, the government enterprise, does not have to be profitable. Because they grabbed the money from another source that they didn't earn. Back to the article. The price for recycling often tends to soar far higher than the combined cost of manufacturing from raw materials and virgin sources and dumping rubbish into landfills. To recycle waste is to use twice the energy and create twice the pollution from factories, trucks, and byproducts. This is typical of most regulations at every level of government. Use propaganda to convince people of the need for a particular program in order to attract votes, and then use whatever resources are required to implement and maintain the program regardless of the waste. In other words, this sounds good for politicians. They can go out and say, hey, I want to conserve the environment. All of you environmental people that are voting on the basis of preserving the environment, come vote for me. I'm going to recycle program. And, you know, never mind that it actually uses more resources, not fewer. It's a way to garner votes. And then, as we said, once the program is started, it doesn't have to be profitable. Never mind that it's wasting resources that got this guy a few votes. And that's why the programs exist, ladies and gentlemen. And our next story under the umbrella of government sins is entitled Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment. You heard about this one? Oh boy. And so, from an article entitled 20 Years Ago, America Apologized for Tuskegee Syphilis Experiments. And this article is dated like May 16th of 2017. It's a little bit older article, but I pulled it up. From the article, in the fall of 1932, the flyers began appearing around Macon County, Alabama, promising colored people special treatment for bad blood, quote unquote. Free blood tests, free treatment by county health department and government doctors. The black and white signs read, you may feel well and still have bad blood. Come and bring all your family. Hundreds of men, all black and many of them poor, signed up. Some of the men thought they were being treated for rheumatism or bad stomachs. They were promised free meals, free physicals, and free burial insurance. Hey, and if you're poor, that's a big deal. Let's pull these poor suckers in. We don't have to tell them what's really going on. All right, what the signs never told them was they would become part of the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. A secret experiment conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service. Yes, your government's looking out for you, folks. The U.S. Public Health Service to study the progression of the deadly venereal disease without treatment. Wonder how that's going to turn out. You guys heard of neurosyphilis, where you go crazy, at the end? The researchers never obtained informed consent from the men and never told the men with syphilis that they were being treated, but were simply being watched until they died and their bodies examined for ravages of the disease. Hey, kind of like, let's treat them like mice, let them die, and then we'll do an autopsy and see what we can learn about the disease. Nobody has to know. Oh boy. Although originally projected to last 6 months, the study extended for 40 years. Local physicians asked to assist with the study and not to treat men, the Center for Disease Control reported in a timeline of the experiment. Decision was made to follow the men until death. In 1945, according to the CDC timeline, penicillin was accepted as a treatment of choice for syphilis. So they began recruiting people in 32, and by 45 they were still running the experiment, and they had a cure for syphilis. It's called penicillin. Penicillin was accepted as treatment of choice for syphilis. The U.S. Public Health Service created what they called rapid treatment centers to help men afflicted with syphilis. Finally, good news for these folks, right? Wrong. Except for the men in the Tuskegee study. So don't ever assume your government is looking out for your best interests. They're always looking out for their interests. Now, why can the state be so cruel and incompetent? A few reasons. There's lack of market forces, like in our recycling story. Never mind that it costs more to recycle than it does not to recycle. It actually wastes resources. If you're a business and you're wasting resources and you're losing money, you go out of business, right? Government doesn't have that problem. So a lack of market forces, such as no competition. And another reason they get away with these things is because once they create some agency or people in government to do these handout jobs programs or handouts or whatever it is, welfare program, etc., it's hard to end the jobs because now you have people that are in those jobs that are going to go vote, right? And you're the one that ended their jobs, you're not going to get their vote. So there's political pressure to continue the program. Doesn't matter how inefficient it is. And success is not a requirement because you steal the funds from the taxpayers. So there's just a few of the reasons why these programs are always better done by the private sector than the public sector. And our final story of the day is entitled, Hillary is Back. Oh no, just when we thought we were rid of her forever. And this is, she recently did an interview with this lady named Julia Gillard, who used to be the Prime Minister in Australia. And this Gillard lady is from the Labour Party there. And that's kind of like the Democratic Party in the United States. It's left-leaning. So we're going to play a few of the video clips here, and then I'll make some comments.
that there is still a very large proportion of the population that is uneasy with women in positions of leadership. And so the easiest way to kind of avoid having to look at someone on her merits is to dismiss her on her looks.
It just dismayed me that, for you, this ended up with chants of lock her up or string her up at Republican rallies. String her up. It's like the Salem witch trials again.
So let's just go through a few of these claims that are made in the video. Clinton claims that, quote, there's still a very large proportion of the population that is uneasy with women in positions of leadership, unquote. Now, let's take that one first. Could it just be that Hillary Clinton was just a really bad candidate? Is that possible? Has that gone through her thought process at all, that maybe people didn't vote for her not because she was a woman, but because she just sucked as a candidate? I'm saying yes, that's what happened to Hillary. Wake up. Reality check, okay? Reality check. Now, this lady Gillard says, quote, it just dismayed me that for you, this ended up for you. She's talking about Hillary. She's sitting with Hillary during this interview, as you saw. It just dismayed me that for you, this ended up with chance of lock her up or string her up at Republican rallies. String her up. It is like the Salem witch trials again. End quote. Now, I did a little internet. I went to YouTube and did a search, Republican National Convention, string her up. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find any such chance. I Googled it. Couldn't find anything, any such video at a Republican rally. I Googled Republican rally, string her up. Didn't exist. Now, folks, this is typical of the left. They just make stuff up. They just make stuff up and pretend it to be true. Now, Republicans did chant, lock her up. Lock her up, as we'll see in this video. Yes, the chant was lock her up. And folks, what happened was, this was all about, as you'll recall, when she was Secretary of State, she had some sensitive information, classified information put onto her server at home. Very unsecure server. So she was being careless with, there was people's names and places. People could die if intelligence information leaked out to the wrong sources. She's putting people's lives in danger with this, being careless with the data. Now, whatever law it is that covers this, I believe it's the Espionage Act. Commentators that I heard went into this in some detail, and they talked about how, in order to be guilty, she didn't mean to do this, it was inadvertent, so therefore, you heard some commentators on TV, she didn't mean to do this, therefore she shouldn't be prosecuted. Folks, it doesn't matter according to the law whether you mean to be, if this is intentional or not. If you're careless with the data, you're already guilty under the law. If this had been a lower level employee and not Hillary Clinton, they would be in jail. I can assure you, vast majority of people would have been in jail for the same thing she did. She should have been locked up. That's our show for today. Thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. If you like the show, be sure to tell a friend. We'd like to grow the show. And Be sure to be with us next time on Liberty Watch, where we don't believe you need some guy with a bullhorn to tell you what to do.